Welcome to the WEFTEC KSB Pump Maintenance Event tutorial. The premise of this event is that recently there has been a changing composition of sanitary sewer that has caused complex problems worldwide. The composition of today's sanitary sewer is different than that of previous years due to an ongoing trend. That trend is the increased use and availability of so-called flushable wipes. These wipes have led to countless numbers of sanitary sewer overflows and additional maintenance and overtime by wastewater workers to keep our systems up and running. These flushable wipes are resistant, flexible, and not designed to be quickly disintegrated in a sanitary sewer system. In fact, they tend to stretch and braid themselves together until they ultimately cause a system failure or a problem. To help combat this problem caused by these wipes, KSB has developed the F-Max impeller. The F-Max's asymmetrical blade arrangement offers a wide free passage for solids and wipes to pass through the pump. Additionally, the blades were designed to create a swirling effect around the shaft area to shift the flushable wipes away from the impeller and shaft and to the outside of the impeller for them to be pumped out. Teams will also be exposed to a emerging trend in safety in electrical work, and that is arc flash. For this event, a utility has been experiencing a multitude of problems at their pump and lift stations due to pumps ragging with these flushable wipes. A pump trouble alarm was received via the SCADA system at the Operations Control Center. A crew has been dispatched to troubleshoot the alarm. The teams will need to troubleshoot the electrical panel and troubleshoot and perform routine maintenance on the KSB submersible pump and wet well, and then ultimately restore the pump station back to normal operating condition. KSB Pump Maintenance Event Task 1 will be troubleshooting the control panel. We will go to the voltage test station and confirm that the power lights are on and visible and lit up red. We will communicate out loud the voltage present at the pump station. We will then open the door to the voltage test station. Using the multimeter, we will begin troubleshooting utilizing the voltage test points on the voltage test station. We will perform the following tests: ground to leg 1, ground to leg 2, ground to leg 3, leg 1 to leg 2, leg 1 to leg 3, and leg 2 to leg 3. While doing each test, we'll be communicating out loud that the voltage is okay for the test that we were doing at that time. Once we have completed all 6 tests, we will close and latch the door and communicate out loud that all voltage has been verified good. KSB Pump Maintenance Event Task 2. Locking out and tagging out the pump station. The safety supervisor must write the date and their initials on the label on the lockout tags with a Sharpie marker. It must be legible. It must be written on the white label and not on the tag itself. The date must be in the following format: month, day, year. The date written on the tag shall be the actual date you are doing the event. We are now continuing Task 2. Lock out and tag out the pump station. On the lift station control panel, turn pump 1 and pump 2, the hand-off auto or HOA switches, to the off position. Put the pump 1 and pump 2 disconnects in the off position. The safety supervisor must install a gang hasp, lock, and tag on both pump 1 and pump 2 disconnect switches. There will be a zip tie on the lockout tagout tag. You must use the zip tie loop to hang from the gang hasp, not the eyelet on the tag. The zip tie shall be looped through the tag eyelet prior to the event starting. After the supervisor's lock has been installed, all remaining team members can lock out as necessary. Once you have completed tasks above, then you will check for pump operation by turning the HOA switch to the hand position to ensure that power has been locked out, and then return the switch to the off position. Then communicate out loud, pump 1 is locked out. You'll repeat the same for pump 2 by turning it to the HOA switch to the hand position to ensure that it has also been locked out and not working. You will then return the switch to the off position.
Pump is locked out.
KSB Pump Maintenance Event Task 3. Closing and locking out the 3-inch gate valve. The safety supervisor must write their initials and date on the tag with the Sharpie marker. It must be legible. It must be written on the white label and not on the tag itself. The date must be written in the following format: month, month, day, day, year, year. The date written on the tag shall be the actual date you are doing the event. You will then close the 3-inch force main discharge gate valve at the pump station. Place the red plastic lockout bonnet on the 3-inch gate valve hand wheel. The 3-inch lockout bonnet must be locked out with a gang hasp, lock, and tag. You shall utilize the zip tie on the lockout tagout tag. Once you have closed the gate valve, you will verify that it is closed and communicate out loud that it is closed. After the safety supervisor lock has been installed, all remaining team members can lock out as necessary. While your locks are locked out during the event, your key must remain in your possession.
Valves locked out.
KSB Pump Maintenance Event Task 4. Arc Flash Verification. Go to the voltage test station and confirm that there are no lights on in the power display. Note that the lights will not actually go out, but as long as if you have completed all steps outlined in Task 2, you may proceed as if the lights are out. You'll communicate out loud that the power is confirmed secure. Open the door to the voltage test station, power on the multimeter, turn to the voltage setting. Using the multimeter, you'll conduct 6 tests: ground to leg 1, ground to leg 2, ground to leg 3, leg 1 to leg 2, leg 1 to leg 3, leg 2 to leg 3. After each test, you'll communicate out loud that those particular tests or legs are clear. Once all 6 tests have been completed, close and latch the door to the voltage test station and communicate out loud all voltage is secured and no arc flash danger is present. KSB Pump Maintenance Event Task 5. Working in the control panel. Note that tasks 1 through 4 must be completed prior to starting task 5. You will first open the control panel. You will then trip the breakers for each fuse. You will then remove each fuse. Using the multimeter to check each fuse for continuity by powering on the multimeter and turning it to the continuity setting. The voltmeter will give you an audible sound if the fuse is good. If there is no audible sound, the fuse is not good. You will then reinstall only good fuses by putting the button in first. You will replace any bad fuses with new good working fuses. You must check any replacement fuses for continuity as well as to ensure they are good prior to installing. Once you have installed all 5 good fuses, you will then close the breakers for each fuse. You will then close and lock both locks on the control panel. The multimeter must be turned to the off position, and the remaining fuses must be placed back in the fuse container with lids screwed back on prior to the end of the event. Please note that if you choose to not perform the continuity test at the panel or directly in front of the panel, you must close the panel and lock at least one of the locks on the door.
Fuse is good. All fuses have been checked. Bad fuses have been replaced.
KSB Pump Maintenance Event Task 6, HMI Interface Programming. Note that these tasks cannot be started until the person has locked out both Pump 1 and Pump 2 and the valve. The task must be completed before the individual completing the task unlocks from Pump 1, Pump 2, or the valve. You will begin by touching Pump 1 status. You will touch the pump model number box and enter the following: KRTF 080-216. Touch enter, touch menu. Then you will then touch VFD1 setup. Touch motor voltage, enter 230, touch enter. Touch motor frequency hertz, enter 60, touch enter. Touch motor amperage, enter 6.8, then enter. Then touch motor speed RPM, enter 1750, touch enter. Touch menu and leave it on the main menu screen. You may use the supplied stylus or remove your gloves to perform this task. However, you can only remove the gloves to perform the task 6, and the gloves can only be removed while in the marked taped area. KSB Pump Maintenance Event Task 7, Assembling the Reid Rapid Gantry Unit. The Reid Rapid Gantry Unit will start fully folded and retracted with all pins in place. Team members will remove the pins, rotate each end support up and over to the underside of the gantry, and pin in the proper locations. The legs on each end will also need to be unpinned, angled out, and then pinned in the proper locations. The gantry height will also need to be fully extended such that the riser bottoms are flush with the cross support on each leg. Ensure both bolts are installed on each end of the gantry. It does not matter which 2 of the 3 holes are used for the bolts when assembling the gantry. With the gantry fully assembled and set up, you will now install the trolley and chain hoist. The trolley shall be installed in one of the 3 center holes of the gantry unit. Once the trolley has been installed and pinned, you will then install a chain hoist by hanging it from the trolley. You are now ready to position the gantry over the wet well. This requires the use of a minimum of 2 people, 1 on each leg of the gantry. Once you are in place over the wet well, you will lock all 4 gantry wheels. KSB Pump Maintenance Event Task 8, Removal of the Pump. Once the gantry is in place and the wheels are locked, connect the chain hoist to the pump. Using the chain hoist, you remove the pump from the wet well. Once the pump is raised to the desired level, you may unlock the gantry wheels. Note, the gantry wheels must be locked while the pump is being raised at all times. Once you have unlocked the wheels, you may now move the gantry with the pump attached to the pump service table. You must use a minimum of 3 people. One person must be in contact with each end of the gantry, and another person must be holding the pump to eliminate excessive swinging of the pump. KSB Pump Maintenance Event, Task 9, Pump Servicing. Once you're in position over the pump service table, lock the gantry wheels. Once the gantry wheels are locked, use the chain hoist to lower the pump to the pump service table. No tool may be in contact with the pump while it is being lowered or raised. For pump servicing, you may place the pump on its side or stand it back upright manually, provided the pump remains in contact with the table at all times. You may not manually lift or move the pump in a manner that causes the pump to lose contact with the table. You may use the gantry and hoist to lay the pump on its side or stand it back upright if you so desire. If you need to move the pump in such a manner that it will lose contact with the table, you must use the gantry and hoist. You will remove the 10mm Volute hex socket bolts. They must be completely removed. They cannot just be unthreaded. They must be physically removed from the hole and placed on the table. Once the volute bolts are completely removed, you must use the gantry and hoist to lift the pump out of the volute and lower the pump back down to the table. While lifting the pump out of the volute, using the chain hoist, you must use the dead blow hammer and or crowbar to help separate the volute from the pump. The pump shall be not lifted any higher than 2 inches off the table to separate the volute and pump using the dead blow hammer or crowbar. Note, do not place any tools, hands, fingers underneath the pump while performing this action, as they will get damaged or hurt when the volute drops. You may slide the volute. This also must be done over the table. You cannot carry the volute off the table to move it to a different location on the table. Once the pump is back down on the table, you may disconnect the hoist. Remove the 6mm impeller hex socket bolt. You must use the dead blow hammer to block the impeller when removing the bolt. The individuals handling the impeller at any time must be wearing leather gloves. To remove the impeller, utilize the 8mm impeller jacking bolt by threading it into the shaft and tighten until the impeller is released and can be safely removed. The jacking bolt must be removed from the impeller and placed back in the toolbox at the conclusion of the event. Clean the intermediate casing wear plate using the wire brush by making 3 passes in a circular motion around the wear plate. Using the air gun, blast air into the impeller bolt hole on the shaft for a count of 5 seconds and verbalize the count: 1 1000, 2 1000, 3 1000, 4 1000, 5 1000. You will then install the new F-Max impeller and a new 6mm hex socket bolt and washer and torque to 20 foot-pounds. You will use Loctite on the impeller bolt prior to inserting the bolt. You will squeeze the Loctite onto the bolt. You will communicate out loud Loctite applied to impeller bolt. You will tighten the impeller down with the standard ratchet until the impeller begins to spin. You may not have the impeller blocked while using the standard ratchet. When you are ready to use a torque wrench, then block the impeller with a dead blow hammer. Be sure to use the correct torque wrench. A new impeller bolt with washer will be provided and will start on the table during your 5 minutes. You may place in the toolbox if you so desire. At the end of the event, the old impeller bolt and washer must be in the toolbox. KSB Pump Maintenance Event, Task 10, Volute servicing. You may slide the volute, but this must be done over the table. You cannot carry the volute off the table to move it to a different location on the table. Remove the guide claw by removing the four 24mm bolts, nuts, and washers using the 24mm socket and or 24mm combination wrench. Install the rubber profile gasket seal into the new guide claw. The ridge of the profile gasket will fit into the slot in the guide claw. Install the new guide claw and the four new 24mm bolts, nuts, and washers using the 24mm socket and or the 24mm combination wrench. The nuts shall be tightened such that with a wrench or ratchet sufficient enough to prevent removal of the nuts without the use of a wrench or a ratchet. You will then install the old 24mm bolts, nuts, and washers back on the guide claw. The nuts must be on the guide claw studs and are to at least be flush with the bolt. KSB Pump Maintenance Event Task 11, Servicing the Wet Well. If at any time during the event you drop anything metal magnetic into the wet well, you will have to use the provided magnet tool to retrieve it from the wet well. Be sure to shake the tool 3 times to remove any excess water prior to removing the tool from the wet well. Remove the 2 9/16 inch bolts with washer, lock washer, and nuts from the guide rail flange. Be careful to not drop any tools, bolts, washers, or nuts in the wet well. Once the bolts in this step have been removed, you can remove the flange and both of the 2-inch stainless steel guide rails from the wet well. Prior to removing the guide rails from the wet well, you must shake them 3 times inside the wet well to ensure all or most of the water is out of the rails prior to taking them out of the tank. Remove the 9/16 nut on the guide rail flange to loosen the rubber compression fittings from each rail so that you can remove the guide rails. Install new rubber compressor fitting and new 2-inch stainless steel guide rails on the guide rail flange. The rubber compression fitting shall be installed such that the nut side of the bolt is what is showing through the guide rail flange. Rubber compression fittings shall be tight enough that the rail does not slide up and down. You can now install the guide rail and flange back in the wet well. You will reuse the same 9/16 inch bolt, washer, lock washer, and nut to attach the flange to the cross member in the wet well. Ensure that the standard washer is on the bolt head side and the lock washer is on the nut side. These shall be tight enough that there is no gap between the flange bracket and the cross member, and they cannot be turned by hand. Ensure the bolts are installed such that the head of the bolt is on the same side of the flange as the guide rails. Install the old 9/16 inch nuts on the guide rail bushings. Nuts must be installed so that they are at least flush with the stud or bolt. KSB Pump Maintenance Event Task 12, Returning the pump to service. Once the pump servicing, volute servicing, and wet well servicing have been completed, you can return the pump to service. Note, you may want to place the volute washers, spacers in place prior to lowering the pump into the volute. If you try to slide the washers in after the pump and volute are together, they may not go in. If you choose to slide them in after the pump and volute are together, you are doing so at your own risk of having to remove the pump to install them because they will not slide in. Note, when placing the pump back in the volute, the orientation of the pump shall be such that the electric cord connection is on the opposite side of the guide claw and pump discharge. Using the gantry and chain hoist, lift the pump back into the volute housing. Prior to installing the 4 new 10mm volt hex socket bolts, you must ensure the pump is properly seated within the volute. It should be metal on metal with very little gap. Failure to do so will result in a judge stopping you from inserting bolts until the problem is resolved. If you fail to heed the judge's warning to stop, a penalty will be assessed. Should you continue to the point that you damage the pump, a more severe penalty will be assessed. Reinstall the 4 new 10mm Volute hex socket bolts hand tight. You also need to ensure the washers are installed as well, such that from the top to the bottom, that is the volute bolt, pump flange, washer, then volute. The washers will be loose and not permanently affixed to the pump or volute. Once the volute bolts are hand tight, using only the torque wrench, torque them to 25 foot-pounds in a crisscross pattern. Be sure to use the correct torque wrench. You may not use the ratchet at any point to reinstall the volute bolts. You will not be penalized for using the torque wrench as a ratchet while reinstalling the volute bolts, provided you got them hand tight first. 4 new volute bolts and washers will be provided and will start on the table. During your 5 minutes, you may place them in the toolbox if you so desire. At the end of the event, the 4 old volute bolts and 4 old washers must be in the toolbox. Once the wheels are locked, connect the pump to the hoist. Using the hoist, raise the pump to the desired level. Once the pump is raised to the desired level, you may unlock the wheels. Note, at no time can the pump be raised or lowered using the hoist with the wheels unlocked. You may now move the gantry with the pump attached to the wet well using a minimum of 3 people. 1 person must be in contact with each end of the gantry, and another person must be holding on to the pump to eliminate excessive swinging of the pump. Once in position over the wet well, lock the wheels and begin lowering the pump using the chain hoist. You will need to guide the pump onto the guide rails. Ensure you are lowering the pump in such a manner and angle that the volute, seal, or gasket is seated properly in the elbow and not pulled out. To ensure you have the best chance at a good seal, the hook should be placed on the pump handle as far away from the guide claw as possible. Once the pump is lowered into the correct place, you may disconnect the hoist from the pump. Once the pump is disconnected from the hoist, you may unlock the gantry wheels. KSB Pump Maintenance Event Task 13. Disassembling the Reid Rapid Gantry Unit. You will remove the trolley and the chain hoist. After removal, reinsert pins in the trolley just as it was during the start of the event. The pins shall be inserted on the same side as they are attached to the trolley. Lower the gantry to the proper level with 2 holes visible at the bottom and reinstall bolts hand tight. Bolts shall be installed in the top and bottom holes, leaving the middle one open. The black nuts shall be installed facing outward as defined when the gantry is fully assembled, and the bolt head will face inward. Reinstall all pins in the gantry and trolley. Pins shall be inserted on the same side as they are attached to the gantry. Fold the gantry up and return to the starting position. Trolley, hoist, and gantry shall be in their initial starting position at the end of the event and within the marked boxes. Touching the tape marks or over the tape marks is not acceptable. KSB Pump Maintenance Event Task 14. Returning the 3-inch gate valve back to service. Each team member will remove their locks, gang hasps, lockout tags, and the valve bonnet will also be removed. You'll fully open the 3-inch gate valve. You'll communicate out loud that the gate valve is open. Each individual that is locked out is responsible for removing their own lock. You may not remove the lock for another team member. The safety supervisor shall be the last one to remove the lock. This task must be completed prior to turning the pump 1 and pump 2 disconnect to the on position.
Valve is open.
KSB Pump Maintenance Event Task 15. Returning the pump control panel back to service. Remove the locks, gang hasp, and tags from pump 1 and pump 2 disconnect. Each individual that is locked out is responsible for removing their own lock. You may not remove the lock for another team member. Safety supervisor shall be the last one to remove their lock. Turn pump 1 and pump 2 disconnect back to on.
Voltage present at the station.
Open the door to the voltage test station, power on the multimeter. Turn it to the voltage setting. Using the multimeter, conduct the following 6 tests to verify proper voltage and to ensure that no equipment damage can occur prior to energizing the pumps. Ground to leg 1, ground to leg 2, ground to leg 3, leg 1 to leg 2, leg 1 to leg 3, leg 2 to leg 3. After each test, you will be confirming that the voltage is okay between the various test points. Please note that this must be completed prior to proceeding. Once you have completed all 6 tests, close and latch the door to the voltage test station and turn the multimeter to the off position and communicate out loud, all voltage verified good. Turn the pump 1 HOA switch to auto, communicate out loud, pump 1 in auto. Turn the pump 2 HOA switch to auto, communicate out loud, pump 2 in auto. Hit the pump 1 start button, communicate out loud, pump 1 is operational. Pump should start pumping water. If the pump does not pump water, a penalty will be assessed. Teams may attempt to troubleshoot and resolve the problem. If the problem is resolved, a penalty would not be assessed. If the pump needs to be adjusted at this point, you must turn the pump 1 and pump 2 HOA switch to the off position before touching the pump. Once you have adjusted the pump to your satisfaction, then turn the pump 1 and pump 2 HOA switch back to auto and hit the pump 1 start button. Communicate out loud, pump 1 is operational. You may repeat these steps as many times as necessary. KSB Pump Maintenance Event Task 16. Prior to the end of the event, all tools that started in the toolbox must be back in the toolbox and the toolbox shall be latched. Any tools or equipment that started on the table must be returned to the table. You will be penalized for any tools that are missing after you complete your run. The team will then return to the starting line. Once all team members have crossed the line, the team captain shall indicate the team is done by communicating stop.
Ready, 3, 2, 1, go! good. Fuse is still good. Ready, fuse is good. Fuse is good. Fuse is still good. Fuse is good. Good. All fuses checked. That's good. Get it there. Get it there. Find the judge. Josh's side. Barbara, 1, 2, 3. Applying that side. Roll it inside the bar. Down inside the bar. Inside the bar. Inside the bar. Go. Left side. Two side. Three side. Four side. All side. Almost ready. Okay, I got it. Lock steel under the table. These things, right here. The other side. Right there.